Page 25. The Decisive Years. The poets have always known, and Sigmund Freud has splendidly confirmed the motto with which Rudyard Kipling prefaced his last work: "Give me the first 7 years of a child, and you may have the rest." Young Baruch Spinoza grew up in the ghetto of Amsterdam, which had but recently taken its character from the newcomers from Spain and Portugal. Among streets where brown-eyed people talked Ladino stood the house of Miguel de Spinoza, a prosperous merchant who made use of connections with the entire world. He was a kind father and a respected citizen. His father had held offices of honor in the congregation as he did. His piety was of a liberal sort, generous and by no means narrow-minded. He soon recognized the unusual gifts of his son Baruch and procured the best teachers for him, who brought him a wide knowledge of the sources of Judaism. But this education of the spirit could be fruitful only after the development of the complex of human proclivities that preceded it. Whether the will of a child is broken through beatings or severity of teachers, whether the outside world has temptations for the adolescent or seems to repel him, whether he can follow the example of his father or must revolt against him, all depends on the manner in which he will later inwardly digest the knowledge offered. And death had begun striking all around Spinoza's powerful father. He brought death to those he loved, who were most closely connected with him, who were his dearest, his wives. When little Baruch came to know his environment, there was already a half-sister, Rebecca, to whom he attached himself as children will. But Rebecca's mother had been his father's first wife and had died. He, Baruch, still had his mother. He grew up under her protection, but when he was 6 years old, she too died. After a proper interval, the father married a third wife. There was no need for Baruch to wonder what her fate would be. The sinister truth that a man may bring death to his wives, and that he may even survive his children, had stamped itself deeply on his mind. When his father died, Baruch was a little over 20 years old, and had already buried 4 of his brothers and sisters. The inward ties which still bound him to his mother, who had been resting so long in the cemetery of O'Kirky, died among the dead, but whose memory he cherished as if she were still alive. These constant inner ties to his mother can be seen in the fact that at the time when he was forced to leave the paternal home and also his larger paternal home, the ghetto, he made his residence opposite his mother's home, the cemetery of O'Kirky. From that moment, the estrangement from the world of his father began to grow. Apart from marriage and children, the father's crest bore 2 devices: Jewish orthodoxy and the business acumen of the merchant. Against both, Spinoza defended himself in his own way, but he opposed. He was not passionately revolutionary, but calm, feminine, definite. Through his power of reasoning, he fell into an ever-increasing opposition to the world of Judaism. He was able to turn away from the commercial world by accepting life pensions which friends or the head of the state granted him. Besides, he earned small sums from a handicraft, the grinding of optical lenses, a favorite occupation of the time. It is reported that he was indeed able to put his mind on the economic side of life, not for his own benefit. That as a boy he collected a debt for his father, and in spite of his youth, certain flatteries of the lady debtor, he counted the sum received. There was a shortage of 2 ducats. And likewise, it is known that in a legal fight with a disagreeable brother-in-law over an inheritance, the first he first wrung out his due and then tossed him the sum he had gained. All that he claimed of his inheritance was a bed and a curtain. It does not make his brother-in-law more likable when we remember his wife, Spinoza's sister Miriam, died in childbirth. Marriage then still endangered the life of women and was to go on doing so until 1850, when the Vietnamese physician I.P. Semmelweis was to uncover the cause for this fate. Through the insufficiently washed fingernails of midwives and doctors, death was carelessly carried into the wombs of young mothers. Another occurrence of his youth forever barred the way to active defiance. In revolutionary attack, to violent insurgents, he was 7 years old when, in the congregation of Amsterdam, the dreadful fate of Gabriel or Uriel da Costa was consummated. The distinguished Portuguese neo-Christian who would not rest in the Christian home of his parents in Lisbon until he and his mother and brothers and sisters could flee into freedom and return to Judaism. And since the power of reason and criticism in his mind did not rest, but forced him, even within Judaism, to doubt and seek certainty, this gallant man finally ended his life with a pistol shot. Although he had suffered the 39 lashes of the penitent and recanter, he had offered himself on the threshold of the synagogue to the feet of those who would step over him, and had wished to disown all his writings and thoughts. Of what did his crime consist? He sought the certainty of God, but the Spanish Jews were as rigid Spaniards and believers as the Spanish Christians. In Holland they embraced humanism. Spinoza was to feel it one day. On the other hand, later on he was to choose the device "Coct, be cautious" for his crest, and this under a rose, so that whatever he sealed with it should be written sub rosa, under the sign of secrecy.